Welcome to the Zanesville City Schools Board of Education regular meeting for May 21st, 2024 at Zane Grant Elementary. I open this meeting at 4:30 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Here.
Mrs. Clark,
Here.
Mrs. Lee,
Here.
Ms. Long, Mrs. Wade.
At this time, I'll have the introduction of guests. Mr. Appleman. Thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Zane Grey Elementary Principal, Mrs. Megan Weingart, to introduce our guests for this evening.
Can you hear me? Okay, I think this is on. So tonight we have Mrs. Lindsay Lawyer's third grade math students here to present to the board and to the wonderful staff and families. So they have published a book for us, Math About Us. They also had a publishing party. I was actually not able to attend their publishing party, so I'm so happy to be here tonight to see what they have to present to all of you. So I know that they're probably so excited and maybe a little bit nervous. So let's welcome them to our board meeting tonight. Just for a second. I wanted to go ahead and give you guys our book so you can pass that around. And really, normally I come up here and I talk about what we're doing and stuff, but this group is doing such a good job presenting that to you. And I always cry, and I will cry again, but they just devoured 5 pizzas up at our room. So they're a little nervous. They're excited. I'm extremely proud of them. And I thank the parents for letting them stay with me and bringing them and coming and picking them up. So we're excited to tell you about our book. Oh, and this is Osiris. You can wave when I say your name. So Osiris, Peyton, Abby, Bryce, Jordan, Camden, Mackenzie, and Ella.
Thank you for asking our class to come today to talk about our class book, Math About Us. We had such a fun time creating this book and love to talk about it to anyone who will listen.
This book was a free project through a company called Student Treasures. Miss Lawyers signed our class up to create a book and was sent a free publishing kit. You heard me right? Free. How cool is that?
We found bits of time during our busy math schedule to work on this project through the month of December, which was a great way to keep our attention as we were all counting down the days until Christmas break.
Each student has their very own page to create with information all about themselves. We got to draw a picture of ourselves and color the page to be our very own.
The creation of the book was quite the process. First, we had to do a rough draft. Then, once we perfected our rough draft, we took the fancy paper the publishing kit came with and did our final copy. Next, we traced with marker very carefully to be sure the marker did not bleed. Finally, we were able to personalize our page with bright colors.
Each student's
page gives fun facts about isms, but it all to math, but relates to, but relates it all to math. We made equations that added up to 8, saved the number of people in our family, and picked a favorite number.
We completed our publishing book with a big author completion party that was over at Azinga Elementary. Our family members, teachers, and even some of you guys came to check out our hard work. It was a fun day.
This book is something we can hold on to for many years and look back at all the friends we made and the fun we had at third grade.
Thank you for asking us to come and share our first published book with you today. And a big thanks to our parents for letting us stay after school and come to this special meeting. Thank you.
And the poster was made by the class for the students who couldn't come tonight. So they made a little cover in case you guys couldn't get to see our book today. Thank you guys so much. Yeah. Margaret, come over here. We're gonna come get a picture. Remember, if we fall, you're in the back. Why don't you come over here? Did you hear that? Your call in the back. Yeah. I don't think anybody's ever said that to me. I think it can be one big row. I think it can be one big row. You guys did an outstanding job. Way to go. Great job. You speak up. I've never speak up. Yeah. Here we go. I'll take the first one. 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna take the next one. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Mrs. Lawyer and staff and parents. We appreciate your effort and are so pleased and proud of the publication that you have made. We will ask you at this time if you would like to be dismissed. That's fine. Parents and students can go at this time as we move on. Thank you for our treats too. The board appreciates that. Thank you for attending. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Stollard for a moment, please, with a project funding.
So I'll be real brief. Turns out that with the federal funding we're supposed to present, how that money's been used, or people have the opportunity to talk about that. In the past, that may have been done at an open house. A lot of times open houses now are come to the building, go to the rooms, not really presenting to families. So we have some reviews, and we just want to make sure that we presented IDEA funding. Basically, our special ed federal funding for the district is $1.496 million. 886,000, rounding these numbers. Of that goes to salaries. $462.9 thousand goes to benefits. The majority of that funds paraprofessionals that are working with special ed students. And then there's a very small amount, 46,000, and for governance and administration, and 42,000 that goes for transportation. And then the non-publics get a portion of all those federal funds. So the non-public, Bishop Fenwick's and others at this particular account get 54,000. So, again, most of the salary benefits, correct, work with those students. And any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Stoller. At this time, I'm going to introduce ZEA presentation with Mrs. Sarah Ganser.
I'm glad that Mark had to go after the cute kids and not me. Good afternoon. So 3 years ago, we were in negotiations and we were all feeling a little bit scared. We were dealing with the after effects of COVID and looking at a whole new world of education. Today, we're no longer quite as scared because we know that you see how hard we've been working. We know that you see how much we pour into our students and our buildings every day. And we know that you're working with us and the negotiations team to provide the very best for our children. My daughter won a speech competition a few weeks ago. We got to go on to the fancy district Rotary level. And I was excited to learn that no one from one. So I decided that she had hopefully that I would share 4 points today. As we hopefully close out our negotiations in the next weeks, hopefully, we are grateful that you're collaborating with us to make sure that each teacher feels appreciated and valued in our district. I think we can all say that we used to focus on 3 things in school: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now I think schools across the nation have far more on their plate to worry about. The 4 points, I'll start with Paul. I like immigration. So number 1, we know that to get kids reading and writing when they're young, we have to reduce numbers. Class size is a hot ticket item across the district, across the state, and across the nation. We know that primary teachers can dig deeper with students when they are able to intervene in the way that our students need us to. We know that you see the value of having an aide in every kindergarten classroom so that our youngest learners have as much support as possible. The only way to bridge gaps that we know they enter with in kindergarten is to be able to intervene in small groups and sometimes one-on-one with the kids who need it most. We're grateful that you've seen the value of these paraprofessionals in kindergarten classrooms. The second R we'll talk about is recruitment. We have to recruit the very best teachers for our kids. That's a non-negotiable. To be able to recruit them, we have to have competitive wages and supportive teaching conditions. We're looking at the other districts nearby and the changes they've made so that they remain competitive in recruiting quality educators. This goes along with the third R, which is retention. I will say this, to the end of my life, Zanesville City Schools has the hardest working teachers that I've ever met in my life. We know our kids come to school not ready to learn, and we get them there. We take children on the journey from not even being potty trained to graduating with honors, going to the best school, going to the military, joining the workforce, and we continue to do that every day. We have amazing teachers here, and we want to keep them here. We have to keep them here. We have to pay them appropriately, and we have to support them appropriately. We are grateful that you are working with us to make sure we feel appreciated as we care for these most precious gifts, our children, every day. Finally, the last I want to share with you is reward. This job that we have chosen to do every day is heartbreaking at times. It is hard. It is more than fun. We do way more than teaching every day. We have to reward the people that have been here in Zanesville, choosing to love these kids and these families, knowing that they really don't have to. They choose these kids, they stick by Zanesville City Schools through everything. Teachers that have been teaching 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, some of them have gone without raises in the past. 0% increases over multiple years without their salaries increasing. These people deserve to be rewarded for staying in our district, sticking with us, sticking with our kids who are so needy, the neediest in the area. Those teachers who are dedicating their lives to our district deserve to be rewarded for their dedication and loyalty. So, as we finish out our school year and hopefully we finish out negotiations, we are grateful. We're grateful that you're taking the time to listen to us and listen to what we need to continue to provide the very best for the children in our school system. My children, your children, and children that need the very best deserve the very best. Thank you for your dedication and helping us give them the very best teachers.
Thank you, Sarah, for your comments. At this time, we will hear from Mr. Jeff Moore, Zanesville Community High School.
Afternoon, everyone. Busy week, obviously, for us in high school this week. Graduation ceremony, 6 p.m. Friday night. If you'd like to join us in the gymnasium of high school, we do appreciate obviously more city schools for allowing us to do that. The deal there, the CHS administration. Just turned into a great place last year. Last night, we had Gary Fry's celebration of life down at Community High School. 40-year teacher, both Zanesville High School, obviously, plus Community High School. Great turnout, a lot of people, a lot of former educators, administrators, a lot of kids, former students of his showed up. We were very pleased with how it turned out. Wednesday and tomorrow, we're having our graduation practice and our senior dinner that we hold every year for our students. Some stay, some go after practice. But we are inviting 96 students to graduation or ceremony on Friday night. I'd love to say that 80 will show up at least, but we'll see. And we're happy with the numbers of 96. Again, obviously, board members, everybody that wants to come. 6 o'clock, plenty of room for the Zanesville High School Gymnasium. 6 o'clock on Friday night, welcome to attend. We're working on a couple upgrades for next year. We're working on a commercial kitchen. We're getting close to that. We have an OFCC grant. We're going to match you guys. Honestly, we're looking to get some numbers there. Chef Deep has some quotes for us on equipment. We're working on trying to get that done this summer. At one point, we're also updating our urban ag, our old urban ag room in the back of the building. It's going to become an office or two in a student area. The student needs to kind of do a little chill out, living on their own, in a quiet environment. So we're working on those couple upgrades. And then finally, Mr. Emmer, our current enrollment is 182 students. He says I start every meeting with so I'll move to the end. So our current enrollment is 182. We do have a max of 200, and we're looking at possibly moving up in the near, future. We've already moved it up recently, and we'll continue to grow. And I guess on behalf of the Community High School, we're proud of what we do down there. Hopefully Friday night, 6:45 goes really well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Baker for a few items.
We're going to revisit tabled items from the last board meeting. Agreement between Zanesville City Schools and Meta Solutions approved to enter into a master service agreement with Meta Solutions for the 2024-25 school year for the purpose of providing core services to the district. Cost of the agreement is $59,737.50.
May I have a motion, please?
Buchanan makes the motion.
And a second?
Wait, will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Abstain?
Mrs. Wade.
Yes.
We have a second tabled item. That's an agreement between Zanesville City Schools and Meta Solutions. Approved to enter into an agreement with Meta Solutions for the 24-25 school year for the purpose of providing ITC services for the district. Services include Info Ohio Library Services, IEP Anywhere, and the cost of the agreement is $14,543.50.
May I have a motion, please? Clark will move and a second.
Buchanan seconds.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Abstain?
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan.
Yes.
At this time, we'll have from the report of the Board of Education, to approve the minutes. Be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the minutes of the Zanesville Board of Education of its regular meeting on April 16th, 2024, and the work session on April 30th, 2024. May I have a motion, please?
Lee will move.
And a second. Clerk will second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Waite,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes. At this time, we'll hear from our treasurer, Mr. Mike Young, treasurer of Board of Education.
Okay, guys, any questions on the April report? Anything, nothing unusual there. Did catch up on some grant requests, so most of those are fairly caught up for the month of May. With regards to the forecast for both schools, relatively unchanged for this year, just a little bit, little increase in things like interest income. Obviously, we're, receiving 5.25% on some of the money market funds. So a little bit of increase there. Expenditures kind of holding steady the last couple of months. So pretty comfortable that that's somewhere where it's going to land. With regards to the community school, obviously their enrollment increases the revenue and the expenditures don't increase a lot because of their blended learning. So this is a little bit more. The thing that I would caution you on their forecast is it's every fund for them, where ours is, the city schools is only the general fund. So sometimes there's some confusion there. You see a lot more federal money revenue and expenditures that may not happen depending on whether or not they spend those. Again, ESSER is the big driver of that difference. And so that will go away, for the future years. So if they spend it, the revenue is going to offset the expenditures. If they don't, it's just going to sweep away. So, but those are the main things. And again, trying to project out, we know what at least the anticipated money is from the state for Zanesville City Schools next year under the formula. And then next year at this time, we'll be looking at a new 2-year budget. So
Which is uncertain, right?
still,
I
it'll be
mean-
the last 2 years of the phase-in of the
Right.
new formula, if they hold true to the
If
6-year
they- Yeah.
phase-in, but you're always at the mercy of, we've had 4 different formulas in my
Right.
10 years. So not a guarantee, just an expectation. With regards to the appropriation items, this is the time of year that you go through and you collect all the increases. Again, sometimes it's as simple as the tax collection rates, like in the bond retirement fund. Really not going to spend that money because the payments have already been made for this year. But like food service, that drop is because we were anticipating being funded at 97% free lunch. And there were some issues with some direct certification with foster students. So that number dropped to between 93 and 94%. So this is just a reflection in drop of revenue. Therefore, we'll have drop in expenditures as well. Most of those other grant items are local grants, and a big chunk of that 582 is all the grants we had from the Straker Foundation that you're going to see on the next item. The 400,000 for employee benefits, that's just an advance that we've reached the point where we need to spend that advance to finish out the year. The others are smaller than all the negatives down through there on the grants. So what the federal government did was during ESSER, during COVID, you could roll every year, everything. And now we went back this year to sweeping out 2.5 years ago's worth, whatever was left got swept out. So again, you're at the mercy of your current budget with those. So Mr. Stoller and I did the best we could as far as finding places to spend the rest of it down. And then those would be the items that kind of got swept out. Then the last item would be, like I said, the 5 grant awards that the Straker Foundation issued this spring. Everything from the design lab to the trail here between the buildings. And then we did get a donation towards the, placing the name of the stadium, the field, into the turf, from the veterans to name that after Vice Admiral Calland.
Thank you, Mr. Young. May I have a motion to accept all the above items?
Wait, we'll move.
In a second,
Lee will second.
any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Waite,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
We'll now turn it over to Dr. Doug Baker.
Okay, item 1 of the agenda, resignation certificated. Approve the resignation of Kaylee Asbell, teacher at Zanesville High School, effective August 15th of 24. Reasons for the resignation is personal. And approve the resignation of Morgan Belsole, teacher at Zanesville High School, effective August 15th of 24. Reasons for the resignation is personal.
May I have a motion, please?
Wait, we'll move.
And a second.
Lee will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Waite,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Item 2, employment correction. Approve a correction to the employment of Tyrone Carper, physical education teacher at Zanesville High School, to reflect MA Step 9, effective August 16th of 24.
May I have a motion, please?
Buchanan moves.
And a second.
Wait, we'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Waite,
Yes.
Item 3, employment certificated. Approve the following certificated personnel as listed for the 24-25 school year, pending appropriate certification requirements and background check.
May I have a motion, please? Clerk will move. And a second.
Buchanan seconds.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Waite,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Item 4, employment substitutes, home instructor. Approve the following substitutes as listed, including maintenance, food service, aides, and bus aides, as and when needed, pending appropriate certification and background checks for the 23-24 school year. And approve the following home instructors as listed, as and when needed, pending appropriate certification and background checks for the 23-24 school year.
May I have a motion, please?
Lee will move.
And a second. Clerk will second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Waite,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Item 5, employment, summer maintenance. Approve the following summer maintenance personnel as listed the summer of 24, as and when needed, at the rate of $12 per hour. The general fund would be utilized.
May I have a motion, please?
Wait, we'll move.
And a second.
Lee will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Waite,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Item 6, employment, summer food service. Approve the following food service personnel as listed for summer of 24, as and when needed, at the rate of $15 per hour. Food service funding would be utilized.
May I have a motion, please?
Wait, we'll move.
And a second.
Lee will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Waite,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Item 7, employee transfer. Approve the transfer of Matthew Windland, ED teacher at Zangray Intermediate, to reflect Dean of Students on a 2-year contract, 10 months, 202 days at National Road Elementary, effective August 5th of 24, pending proper certification background check. Salary will be DOS 04, step 0 from the approved administrative salary schedule for 24-25.
May I have a motion, please?
Buchanan moves.
And a second.
Wait, we'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Mrs. Waite,
Yes.
Item 8, annual salary notifications, classified. Approve the following classified annual contracts and salary notifications for the 24-25 school year.
May I have a motion, please? Clerk will move. And a second.
Lee will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan.
Yes.
That should be
Mrs. Wade.
Mrs. Waite.
Yes.
Item 9, FMLA leave of absence. Approve the following employees as listed for FMLA leave of absence.
May I have a motion, please?
Lee will move.
And a second. Clerk will second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Item 10, supplemental contracts. Approve the following supplemental contracts as listed for the 24-25 school year, pending required certification and background check.
May I have a motion, please?
Wait, will move.
And a second.
Lee will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Item 11, extended time, guidance and nurse. Approve the extended time for the following individuals as listed for summer of 24 prior to the 24-25 school year. Rate of pay will be per diem rate as and when needed.
May I have a motion, please?
Wait, will move.
And a second.
Lee will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Item 12, extended time, special education. Approve extended time for the following staff members as listed for the summer of 24. The purpose is to allow the staff members to evaluate, meet with preschool parents as and when needed. The rate of pay will be hourly rate of their daily per diem.
May I have a motion, please?
Buchanan moves.
And a second.
Wait, will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Wade.
Yes.
Item 13, extended time mediation. Approve the following individuals as listed for extra time for a mediation meeting. Pay will be $25 per hour.
May I have a motion, please? Clerk will move. And a second.
Buchanan seconds.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan.
Yes.
Item 14, extended time certificated. Approve the following individuals to be paid $100 for administering the AP Physics exam on May 17th of 24 at Zanesville High School.
May I have a motion, please?
Lee will move.
And a second. Clerk will second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Item 15, volunteers. Approve the following volunteers with thanks and appreciation as listed for Zanesville City Schools for the 23-24 school year, pending appropriate background checks.
May I have a motion, please?
Wait, will move.
And a second.
Lee will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Item 16, 21st Century Summer Program, teachers and paraprofessionals. Approve the following teachers, grade K through 12, as listed for 21st Century Programming for the summer of 24, as and when needed at the rate of $40 per hour, pending certification and background check. 21st Century federal funding and/or Muskingum Behavioral Health Grant and/or Title I funding will be used as and when needed. And approve the following paraprofessionals, grades K through 12, as listed for 21st Century Programming for the summer of 24, as and when needed at the rate of $20 per hour, pending certification and background check. 21st Century federal funding and/or Muskingum Behavioral Health Grant and/or Title I funding will be used as and when needed.
May I have a motion, please?
Wait, will move.
And a second.
Lee will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Item 17, Zanesville Community High School items. These items will be paid with ZCHS funding. Approve the transfer of Amy Jackson, teacher at ZHS to ZCHS, the 24-25 school year. Salary will be MA, step 26 from the ZCS teacher salary schedule. Approve a one-year retiree hire for Katrina Vandergriff, intervention specialist at ZCHS for the 24-25 school year. Salary will be MA plus 45, step 0 from the ZCHS. ZCS teacher salary schedule. Summer school items to be paid with ZCHS ESSER funding. Approve Garrett Young as summer school substitute teacher from June 14th through 28th, $40 per hour, not to exceed 4 hours per day. Approve Lonnie Tysonser as a summer school teacher, June 3rd through 28th, as needed for $40 per hour, not to exceed 4 hours per day. And approve Jason Stevens as a summer school paraprofessional from June 3rd through 28th, $20 per hour, not to exceed 4 hours per day.
May I have a motion, please?
Buchanan moves.
And a second?
Wait will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Wade.
Yes.
Item 18, summer school employment, ZCS administrators. Approve the following administrators as listed to manage all summer school 24 programming at their assigned building site as and when needed, pending certification and background check, 21st century funding and/or Muskegon Behavioral Health Grant and/or Title I funding will be utilized to pay their hourly per diem for duties performed outside of their regular contractual hours.
May I have a motion, please? Clerk will move. And a second?
Buchanan seconds.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan.
Yes.
Item 19, stipend, MD, AU, and ED teachers and paraprofessionals. Approve a stipend in the amount of $800 for paraprofessionals and teachers as listed upon completion of a 40-hour registered behavioral technician training. Training must be completed by May 31st of 24. Funding will be Title IV-A.
May I have a motion, please?
Lee will move.
And a second? Clerk will second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Item 20, student handbooks 24-25. Approve the attached student handbooks for the 24-25 school year.
May I have a motion, please?
Wait will move.
And a second?
Lee will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Item 21, Applewood Centers Incorporated Agreement. Approve to enter into an agreement with Applewood Centers Incorporated to provide special education services for a student placed with Belfair Residential Treatment Facility. Services are provided by Reserve School for the 23-24 school year at a cost of $298.91 for each school day during the student placement.
May I have a motion, please?
Wait will move.
And a second?
Lee will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Item 22, Bridgeway Academy Agreement. Approve to enter into an agreement with Bridgeway Academy to provide educational services for the 24-25 academic year and summer program for 24 for one student. The amount will be $42,760 for the 24-25 academic year and $7,045 for summer of 24.
May I have a motion, please?
Buchanan moves.
And a second?
Wait will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Mrs. Wade.
Yes.
Item 23, New Story Schools Agreement. Approved to enter into agreement with New Story Schools to provide educational services for one student for the 24-25 school year. Rate for their educational service is $8,995 per month. Speech and occupational therapy will be provided at $150 an hour.
May I have a motion, please? Clerk will move. And a second?
Buchanan seconds.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan.
Yes.
Item 24, multipurpose building change orders. Approve the following change orders as listed with Summit Construction Company related to the construction of the multipurpose building.
May I have a motion, please?
Lee will move.
And a second? Clerk will second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
And item 25, policy items for approval as listed. These were the policy items that were reviewed last month.
May I have a motion, please?
Buchanan moves.
And a second?
Lee will second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Wade,
Yes.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark.
Yes.
Mrs. Lee.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. We'll look at some of the board committee updates. Lori, anything with legislation?
The House Bill 250, which is the military seal, and then the cell phone policy, which I'm happy to report, we were already ahead of the game with that. And It's been nice to be able to share, even in my work that I'm doing, some anecdotal evidence that is working and it's going well. So excited to be ahead of the game on that particular piece. And then just knowing that there's another one that we should watch, which is House Bill 485. It has some similar language in it, but it's dealing more with internet safety and social media and media literacy. So that has some impact, kind of goes hand in hand with that cell phone one, but then also making sure that we're educating students around the idea of how to properly use media literacy and with that and social media. So those are some that's one you should be watching to see if that one goes through. So.
Thank you. And student achievement.
Well, obviously, we had great student achievement
Yes.
today.
Yes,
So,
we did.
and then, of course, there's been lots of things posted about student achievement. I know the News ZTV won some great awards recently. So we're excited about that. Also, with just graduation coming up, this is the season. I know I was at those awards night for the seniors and academic awards night. So lots of things to celebrate there. So yeah, so
Great.
I don't know. I know other people have been able to be in the buildings and I haven't been, but I've been, we know that there's lots of student academic or achievement, and that is why we're all here. So
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for everybody involved with all of that. It's been outstanding seeing this happen. Audit committee. Hey, Mike,
Nothing.
insurance.
Insurance wise, not health insurance, but the district's liability coverage, I got a notice today with, they plan to renew with conditions. So I need to get a hold of Mr. Price and find out what conditions we might be talking about. So
Thank you.
I'm sure it's our claims.
Yes, correct.
with the ropes, yeah.
Buildings and grounds, anything, Mindy, do you want to talk multi-purpose building?
Sure. I don't have anything to report from the individual buildings
No.
because we
No.
weren't able to meet. But things are moving right along at the multi-purpose building despite all the rain we've had, with more coming. But this Monday, they were digging for underground plumbing and electric. All the masonry has been completed, hence the retaining wall. Over the next 2 weeks, they're planning to start setting the metal building, and the slab concrete pad is scheduled also to be poured, well, this week, Friday, May 24th. And waterproofing pending weather. And they don't seem to be concerned at all about the weather delaying progress. They feel that we're in good shape for September.
And they're moving all the steel beams around, so those will be the next thing up, which is exciting to see those go up. I think I did see, Matt, anything? I think I did see they were going to work on the generator finally coming up in June. Yeah, good. It's a good thing. So thank you for that. Business advisory, there wasn't any.
July
That
30th
last one,
is next.
yeah, yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you for everybody attending this evening. We appreciate the student effort, ZEA's mentioning as well. So at this time, be it resolved that the Zanesville City Schools Board of Education is adjourned at 5:13 p.m. May I have a motion, please?
Buchanan moves.
And a second.
Leo second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Buchanan,
Yes.
Mrs. Clark,
Yes.
Mrs. Lee,
Yes.
Mrs. Wade.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for attending, and have a good evening.
Thank you.